Many Christians believe another temple will be built in Jerusalem in our future. However, no future temple is prophesied in the New Testament, and there's no end-time Bible prophecy in the New Testament that predicts a future temple to be built in Jerusalem. Standing before the temple buildings around AD 30, Jesus warned his disciples about the end time. He never suggested or alluded to or predicted a future temple. The first temple was Solomon's, built in 950 BC, and Nebuchadnezzar set fire to that temple in 586 BC. Some 70 years later, Zerubbabel's temple was completed in 512 BC, and it was rebuilt and completed by Herod in 9 BC. It was laid desolate in AD 70, in the near future of the disciples. No more temples are prophesied in the New Testament. In addition, author's intent in the New Testament matters. All predictions of the tribulation, end time, and second coming would be soon to the disciples and would be in their generation before they all passed away. So why do so many Christians believe a future temple will be built in Jerusalem? The answer relies on various assumptions, and only one wrong assumption makes a conclusion false. So here's a list of some assumptions required for a future temple. Number 1, we assume the end time is in our future because if it had occurred in the past, the end would be a planetary-wide event, well-documented history, and our world would be a bit different now after the end. Since the temple is destroyed in the end time, another temple must be built so it can be destroyed with no stone left standing. The temple destroyed in AD 70 could not have been the one which Jesus warned his disciples. Therefore, the temple with no stone left standing must be a future temple to be built in Jerusalem so it can be destroyed in a future tribulation. Second assumption, we assume the habitable earth and inhabited earth in biblical times means the entire planet today. Therefore, the end time involves the entire planet, including a future temple which must be demolished. Third assumption, since we assume the end time is in our future, we assume the tribulation is in our future because it is part of the end time. In my last video, I showed how the historical tribulation in Jerusalem during the Jewish wars is a perfect match for Jesus' detailed description of things to come. However, for reasons just mentioned, we assume this cannot be the tribulation Jesus predicted. Therefore, a future temple must be built and then destroyed with no stone left standing during that tribulation. Fourth assumption, we assume the end is the end of the world. Jesus was asked by his disciples, "What is the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" His response was about the end of the age, not the end of the world. Fifth assumption, we assume the end of the age means the end of the world. Jesus told his disciples about the sign of his coming and the end of the age. We assume the word age is equivalent to the word world. 6, generally the word you in any book refers to the person being addressed. However, we assume the word you in the New Testament almost always refers to you, the reader. And the seventh assumption, we assume Jesus is telling us today about the sign of his coming and the end of the age. Jesus was speaking to his disciples. Describing the end of the age, he said, "Watch out that no one deceives you. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Then you will be handed over to be prosecuted. So when you see standing at the holy place the abomination that causes desolation," and so forth. Most of us assume you is we, the reader today. This implies the end time is in our future today. Therefore, we assume another temple must be built in Jerusalem so it can be laid desolate according to New Testament Bible prophecy. The eighth assumption is some people assume the theory of dual fulfillment, meaning Jesus was warning his disciples about two temples at the same time, the one that was destroyed in AD 70 and a future temple not yet built. Now, these assumptions are inconsistent with biblical intent and problematic. New Testament prophecy does not support a future temple in Jerusalem. I suggest a simple approach to the words of Jesus without being complicated. Look at his words without interpretation. The disciples were adequately prepared for the things to come and heeded his warnings. All is documented in my book, Prophecy Paradox, The Case for a First Century End Time, and you can find my links in the box below.